So good morning. My name's Scott. I'm one of the pastors here, and it is really good to be with you this morning. Some mornings I find this more energizing, and some mornings it's maybe a little bit like I get paid to do this, so it's like the job deal. This morning I'm energized to be here. But it's with this tension of course, the last week and the nuances happening and the pain happening in our country. And I think we all come to this conversation about loss and death and victims and perpetrators. We all come to it through a different perspective. I know my wife and I, we were talking this past week, we have 2 teenage boys. And after all, it's been young men who have been the ones bringing on intense pain these days. And you look at this sort of sense of what's it mean to rear children and to bring them into this sense of reality, and what is it that happens that allows children to make these, in particular young boys, to make these kinds of decisive and tragic calls. And you just have these sort of conversations, and you just have these spaces in which you're sitting with, and you don't know what to always do with it. But I think for us, there's a sense of solidarity with you and saying, well, what's it mean to raise our kids in such a way that we keep this kind of pain more at bay? And so maybe this morning, if nothing else, I don't think we're going to fix something this morning. We're not going to solve this major national problem, or for that matter, a global issues that we've got going on as well. But maybe we get to sit with a sense of solidarity and unity together this morning. So this series, Gold Leaf, I think it speaks into where we are in a very real way, right? It's this Japanese methodology of mending pottery, which uses gold leaf to piece cracked and broken fragments back together. And so some of the most beautiful parts of this broken pottery are the most valuable, right? This gold and the way that this gold glues together, which was once something more beautiful, was something very beautiful now, and in a certain way is actually more beautiful and more valuable. It was the brokenness that brings this sense of value. So I want to do, if I can this morning, in terms of leaning into what's going on in our greater national consciousness right now and what is going on in terms of the sense of brokenness, which is something I think we all have navigated at different levels. We've all navigated at different times. And so if I can this morning, I'd like to take you on a journey, a little bit of a journey that I revealed a few months ago in terms of a concept and a notion that is not unique to me, and I'll get into that here in a moment, but I'd like to revisit it if I can, because I've sat with it a little bit longer these days. And so I want to maybe take you along with me in a space this morning that is some of my own personal experiences, and I think might be relevant for you guys. So resentment, it's something we all navigate at times, right? So resentment is a sense of bitter indignation to having been treated unfairly. It's something that is real for all of us. It's something that's true for all of us. We all live in a space of, at different times, dealing with resenting people that have hurt us. Some who have hurt us very deeply, and others who have hurt us so we think they have hurt us. And what I mean by that is often resentment is really sort of supported with this sense of expectation. Because expectations are stories that we believe about how others will behave. This is something I think that is sort of part of the norm for most of us. But we have these unmet expectations in all of our relationships. Most of the reason why we have these expectations that are causing this great pain of resentment is because people don't live up to those expectations, but rarely do we actually ever sit down and say, well, let's define what the expectations even are. Not only do we not define those expectations, but we attempt to impose on other people. We want them to sort of live out these expectations that we need them to be for us. But we don't ever even talk about it. And so we manipulate the relationship, and we do these sort of passive-aggressive kind of side hustles in terms of, well, maybe if you hear it this way, then you'll click on to what I'm really struggling with and what I need you to be. And, of course, they don't. And then you begin having even greater, intense, and more sort of in a real-life way, the sense of resentment. You've been, after all, treated unfairly because you're asking them to be something that you've never really asked them to be. You're just assuming it on them. And often this is how we engage relationship. And at times those expectations that we have that create resentment, that whole dance, it can be really exhausting. It can be really tiring. can be complex and overwhelming. And it's really, really hard to try to somehow change somebody else's way of being so that they can meet your needs. That is a really, really hard place to be, especially if you don't ask and be very clear on what the needs are. And so what it does, it takes us down a trajectory of haunting patterns. Patterns that lead to dysfunctional relationships, patterns that lead to the sense of exhaustion, patterns that lead to this shame and this guilt. And so maybe the conversation this morning, maybe the journey we can go down is, what does it mean to sort of remove the space of resentment based on false expectations? That maybe we are saying to ourselves, well, in a real sense, I'm tired of that, but I would really love to thrive in a relationship and not just sort of maybe suffer through it. Which raises a whole other conversation for me, and I kind of take a quick sidebar if I can. I think for many of us, it's important to understand that pain ultimately cannot be avoided. Pain is something that happens to all of us. It's something that is part of our reality. It's part of our day-to-day. Pain is something that often happens to you. Pain is something that you often might start and see through, which is sort of the reality with which many of us live. But suffering is the part that is a choice. I think this is really important to understand, that for many of us, we have these spaces of resentment that lead to false expectations, that leads to a sense of pain that is not necessarily necessary, that does not have to happen, that we find ourselves in these places of pain, and suffering is the one thing that we can control. You cannot control the pain of your life, but you can control how you live into that pain, how you allow it to operate and fulfill the moments of your day. And so at some point, the hope is you move to this place where you say, I'm tired of suffering. And you say, I want to make some changes. So Wednesday nights, we have preface in here, and as our last night we had preface. And each of the Wednesday nights we were here, the basement fills up with our AA groups that we host in our space here. And there's 2 of them on a Wednesday night, back to back, like 6 and 8 or something of that sort. And there's 60 or 70 or 80 people downstairs both times. And when you lean into that group, into that community, they're very quick to say, oh yeah, absolutely, pain is something that we have probably brought on. They own that part of that pain. They own the reality of their existence and the angst of which they've brought to relationships and friendships and the loss that they've had. But they've also come to this place that says, you know what, I'm tired of suffering. I want to figure out what it means to break this rhythm and break this tradition of haunting my life and ruining my life. And I know as we leave here each Wednesday night, the parking lot is packed full of everybody who has exited the building. And there's something in the air. There's a sense of hope. There's a sense of, simultaneously, like with a sense of brokenness, right? There's a lot of pain. But it's as though they're sort of saying, I am doing my best to keep suffering at bay, because they have this real meaningful dance with pain and with suffering. And so they want they're tired of it and they want to move on past that. And so maybe this morning the same conversation might be true for you. Many of us are sitting here in our seats this morning, dealing with real pain in a very real way. And you're allowing that pain to extend into suffering that it haunts you and it wreaks havoc on how you see your reality. And maybe the pain leads into a space of resentment because you have these expectations that the person that you supposedly loved, or your child, your coworker, your employer, or whoever it was supposed to live up to some ideal reality for you, and they didn't. And when they didn't, it broke your heart, it broke your expectations, it ruined your career, you lost everything, and of course you have this sense of resentment. And that cycle, what does it mean for us to get out of that? What does it mean for us to not live in a space where constantly haunted by the reality of resentment and false expectations? That at some point you decide, well, you know what, I want more. I'm tired of playing small. I'm tired of the shame and the fear and the hurt and the anger. I'm tired of unrealistic expectations that we fundamentally don't communicate or talk about. How do I get out? How do I unlock the door? You can't heal what you can't acknowledge. I think for some of us, we get stuck in these loops. And we don't even know we're there. And we find ourselves not being able to get out of them because fundamentally we enjoy them in some kind of jacked up, haunted way. So maybe this morning, what I can offer you And I think it's one of the benefits sort of this community that we extend to our people tools, resources, talents and skill sets and nuances that help you in how you see relationships and how you see reality and how you see faith and how you see spirituality, right? Some of you are here because you had an unmet expectation in some kind of church spiritual space before that was so oppressive that you said, I can no longer be in that. And so you said, I'm tired of suffering, and you're looking for something different. So maybe that's why you're here this morning. But I want to give you a tool. I want to give you a resource this morning that I heard about a year ago, and a friend of mine extended this to me, and it's been very, very helpful for me, so much to the point that I've like printed this tool out, and I have it in my office near my desk. It's something I find myself living into every day. So if resentment is rooted in false expectations that lead us to haunting patterns that are dysfunctional, we find ourselves in this space, in this loop of just being stuck. So what if I can kind of throw at you, and again, some of you might remember this. I hit on this several months ago, and I kind of want to lean into it a little bit more intentionally. David Emerald, he produced this tool in the late 60s called the drama triangle. And he surmises that this is something that we all find ourselves living in. And I'm going to invite you to hang with me on this, because I think this might be a tool that will be very meaningful for you. It'll be helpful for you in your home and your relationships. I know it has been for myself. In this drama triangle, it's like quicksand. You get sucked into it. We step into it. It sucks you under. Often for days and for weeks, you get into this loop that you seemingly cannot get out of. It shows up when we respond in fight, flight, freeze, or we're trying to appease people, that kind of mode. And the cost is precious minutes, pennies, energies, and calories. And so most of us enter this place of drama triangle as a victim. This is where most of us begin this whole process. And so I'm going to try to share some stories with you that are kind of surfacey a little bit, but hopefully they get to the point, because I think it's helpful to understand. So my poor wife tolerates me helping her hang pictures in our home. She has a great eye for design, great eye for style, great eye for creating a wonderful environment. And we have an old 20s house that is all plaster. You ever try to hang plants or pictures on a plaster wall? It's a massive production. It's the drill bit, it's the sinker, it's the massive screw. Invariably, the sinker doesn't work right, and so you got to get a bigger one, but you don't have a bigger one, so now you got to go Home Depot and get a bigger one. You got this massive hole in your wall for a small picture, right? Or you're off by an inch, and now you have to re-drill another hole. And so it's this, and there's dust everywhere, and very quickly, I find myself getting into this, like, my blood pressure's going up, I'm frustrated, I'm not patient in this. To me, these pictures are extra, right? They're in the way anyway, something I gotta dust, something I gotta maintain. I have this sort of minimalist disposition. My wife does not, and likes to hang things on the wall, again, which is fine. And my poor wife navigates this in a very real way. I find myself getting frustrated. I find myself falling into this, like, why do I have to do this? I don't even think this is really that important, after all. That's kind of what I'm saying to her, right? When I get all worked up. And I'm this victim because I'm the one that's got to clean up after all this. I'm the one that's got to get all dust all over myself, and I'm trying to figure these things out. And I got to run to Home Depot. And so I click quickly into this victim space. Now, let me be really clear. There are true victims. That's not what I'm talking about here. Right? Some of you have been, in a very real way, victimized in horrific ways. So I'm not discounting that, and that's not what I'm talking about here. But in a way, there's some similarities, right? Because at some point, for those of you who are victims, you moved out of that space. You had to, for your own wholeness. But that's another conversation. That's not what I'm saying here. So in the space, in the thought process of a victim, we are powerless and at the mercy of life circumstances. We show up, poor me, poor us. We're unwilling to take responsibilities for what is going on. That's because, after all, I'm a victim. I can't control all that's happening. Life happens to me. It's not my fault. I'm powerless. My dream isn't possible. I long to be this minimalist, but it can't happen because I got to hang these pictures, right? Whatever the drama might be. Poor me. That's what I fall into. And the feelings that one has as a victim, in a little bit we like it, but it's a feeling of helplessness and hopelessness and victimized in being discounted. Like I'm not valued. And somehow we like to wallow in that. And the behaviors we find ourselves doing is we distance ourselves, we give up, We have little energy for forward motion. Right? When you're in the space of victim, you might not be as apt to say, I'm going to go exercise. I'm going to eat better. I'm going to pursue relationships and conversations that are meaningful. It's easier to kind of just hunker down and sort of become a recluse because, after all, I'm a victim. After all, I'm being served horrifically, and I need to sit in that by myself and sort of wallow in that pain and that pity. Then for many of us, we move from the space of a victim to a rescuer. And we can go back and forth in this very easily. And this is really important to understand because I think often we think, well, the idea of a rescuer is a good thing, right? We're fixing people. But actually, it's deeply dysfunctional and toxic. So, again, a relatively surface illustration. My older son works at a restaurant, and he eats his profits. When he's done working, he buys food at the restaurant and brings it home and eats it. I'm like, dude, food is free in my house, at least right now, so enjoy it, right? At some point it's going to cost you, but right now it's free. Why would you spend your money on this food and when you can come home and eat? And so quickly we kind of get into this little sort of scuffle, and it's this frustrating experience, and he wants to do all these things with his money, but he doesn't have any because he's eating all his profits. But what will happen is he then wants to hang out with some of his friends. And what I know for my sons, and I think typical of our students, our kids, is they are best served when they're in community, right? Especially these days during COVID. The last couple of years, everybody's been hunkering down. Relationships have not been happening the same. So anytime my sons in general want to go out with their friends, like whatever we got to do, we'll host you here. We'll help make it we'll take you wherever you need to go. Absolutely, you be with your friends. But invariably, he says, well, Dad, I need some money to hang out with my friends. It's like, well, dude, you ate your profits already. Well, I mean, of course, yeah, but it's your problem. But instead of leaning into, son, it's your problem, what do I often do? I rescue him. All right, here's $15. Go ahead and go out and be with your friends, or whatever it is that you go play some golf or whatever it is you guys are doing, and I get behind that. So instead of allowing him to sit in the space of possibly sort of accepting his own responsibility, I come along and I fix it. And why do I fix it? Because it builds my ego. Right, as rescuers, this is what we get to do. I save others from harm. Man, that feels pretty good, like I've come in and I've rescued. And if I do good and save them, then somehow I have a sense of worth and value. Because after all, I feel sorry for them because they're the victim. That's how I see them, right? They're the victim while I'm the rescuer. I intervene on behalf of the victim to save them from perceived harm. And it fosters a sense of dependency, this sort of codependency. Well, they need me, and that I feel really good when they need me. That's really a good thing. And so what do I feel into that? Well, I'm afraid that I'm not going to be needed. It's why I rescue. It's why I come around my son. After all, I need him to need me, right? That's what parents and kids do, especially when we're in this toxic kind of sort of drama triangle. I feel superior to the victim because, after all, I'm been around the block a few times. I know more than you, son, so I'm better at this than you are. And how we behave, we jump in to save the day. We foster this sort of dependency and indispensability. We may sacrifice the truth to protect others, shield others from the consequences of their actions. I mean, after all, I'm going to kind of protect him because in doing so, I keep him at bay from actually really learning what it means to navigate and maybe budget his own resources. And then quickly, and again, I can kind of move, so it's real easy to move in and out of victim and rescuer. Like you can almost hear victim language and rescuing language in both of those kinds of illustrations. And there's this third part of this drama triangle is called the persecutor. It's real easy for me to sort of unleash on Colson, my oldest, and persecute him for eating the profits. It's real easy to say, Colson, I've done this before. You should listen to me because I'm right. You have no idea what you're doing. You're missing out on an opportunity. I can sort of lay into all of that because, after all, as a persecutor, I must win. I must dominate others by getting ahead because, after all, again, I know best. And so what am I feeling into the space? Well, as a persecutor, I feel defensive. I feel on guard. I feel discounted. So I must lash out because you're not hearing me. You don't understand. If you're hearing me better, and so you raise your voice, you get more frustrated and more angst. There's a sense of self-righteousness. And how I behave is I might dominate and control a space. Because after all, in order to persecute you, in order to come after you, I got to be really strong and present. I'm critical and I might blame you. I might overtly or covertly power over you. I think that I must win at any cost and control others. And this is where often we say the things that are so hurtful that we can't bring back, right? You're so amped up. You're so in this persecutor mode that you say something and you're like, oh, I said that, and you wish you could pull it back. And then we find ourselves in that place of, I'm going to say anything I can to win, no matter what it costs, no matter how it tears at your soul. In this place of victim, rescuer, and perpetrator, we can move in and out of all of those at any given moment with multiple relationships at any given time simultaneously. We might see this within our marriages or our relationships, or the partner that left you, or your children, or again, your coworker, or your employer, or employees. This dreaded drama triangle is something that we get so sucked into that often we don't even know it's happening. So the question that surfaces for me, all right, I get it. I can see myself in that. What's it mean to move out of that? How do we exit that space so that we don't have to live in that indefinitely? How is it that I can find out what it means to live in a space of not as much resentment, where I actually do communicate expectations, where there's a sense of clarity in who we are? And so and I think it's a little bit hokey in terms of how he calls it, but it's called the empowerment dynamic, is what he calls this other triangle, the space of empowerment. So instead of being a victim, we're offered this opportunity to be a creator, one that sits with like the curiosity of what is going on, that I have a choice despite my circumstances. As a creator, I might sit down with my son and say, son, let's put together a budget. So what is it you want? Oh, you want a better vehicle than the piece of crap that I have you drive? Okay, well, you got to save some money, not stop eating your profits. And so what's that mean? So let's budget that. Oh, you want to be able to socialize and do other things with other friends? Okay, I get that. So how do you figure out? And so maybe we have a conversation that's actually meaningful, that's actually productive, that's actually creating a sense of wholeness, and not me approaching the whole space as a victim, rescuer, or persecutor. And so we sit together. We continue to grow. I'm focused on what I want to create in the other relationship, in myself, in what they need from me. I see my relationships, I see my identity as a problem solver, not as one who's a victim, but one who can actually bring solution to the space. And this is where I think we move from a place of pain and suffering to just a place of pain, because we allow our suffering to keep at bay. And so how do I feel as a creator? Well, as a creator, after all, there's hope, right? I feel hopeful. I feel energized. I feel inspired. I feel resilient. And as one who has a behavior, how am I acting out my behaviors as a creator? Well, I'm action-oriented. I take responsibility for my own choices. I take responsibility for my corner of the table that I need to own. This one right here is really hard for me. Like, take baby steps. Got to be patient. Got to be slow. This is very methodical. This is very intentional. This is not always trying to fix it, but it's being able to kind of lean into it. A couple weeks ago, so my youngest son is 14, and he's in a heavy metal band, as most 14-year-olds are. Again, you would think, like, Taryn and I are not necessarily heavy metal people, but our son is, and it's really cool to watch how this has played out for him. It's really fun. He's exposed us to a lot of neat stuff. So he has this band, of which he's the youngest, and the oldest is 18. And so they've moved their rehearsals over to our house. We have a basement that's maybe like 120 square feet. When I say a basement, I mean like a crawl space that 70 years ago somebody dug a hole out of the ground, and it's down in this basement, and it's like the bowels of our house. And they're taking these huge tower speakers and these drum kits and these guitars, and they're plugging them into our basement, and they're virtually on top of each other, and they have these string lights, and they dim them, and they just go to town, and the whole house is like lifting off the foundation. Neighbors can hear it, and having this it's a really sweet time. And these kids at one level are nothing like you would think them to be. They walk in, and they look like heavy metal people. They're, real skinny and long hair, and, they're kind of just slouching a little bit and trying to act bad to the bone. But when they talk, they're incredibly pleasant. Oh, thank you, Mr. Hofert, for having us over. Mrs. Hofert, thank you for the pizza. It's really sweet. And there's these gracious, wonderful young people, like going to Berkeley music kind of space, and they're brilliant, they're smart, they're creative, and the other day, one of the kids who's going through some difficult times at home, he told Keen, my son, he said, I don't know whatever's going on in this house, but there's a sense of calm here. There's a sense that, like, the way I feel in this space is restful, is peaceful. And I'm pretty convinced he wouldn't have said that if I was in my minimalist mode, with nothing on the walls, with no pictures, with no plants. And what I would have missed out on, and what I do miss out on, and what other people would have missed out on, if I would have been trying to impose just my sort of, I think I'm right agenda, I'm a victim, let's just do it my way, and if we don't do it my way, then I'm going to be a pain in the ass through the entire process. And so this moment of, oh, okay, yeah, you know what, babe, you're right. I'm so glad we get to lean into this space this way. And so instead of a persecutor, we can then become a challenger. And I think this is important to understand, that it's not about attacking somebody, but it's about trying to lean into what does it mean to sort of wrap our arms around this and take this to the next level. And start leaning into challenging assumptions and status quos. I think this is true for many of you. You're here at Watershed because at some point you became disenfranchised with a church space. It was dysfunctional for you. It was painful for you. And you said, you know what? I got to get out. And you challenged the status quo and you realized it wasn't what you needed it to be. And so you're looking for something different. And then maybe you show up here. And with all our imperfections, you're saying there's something meaningful here. There's something worth diving into. And the thoughts you have as a challenger, as things unfold, again, at their own pace. This is where we have to be patient again here. As a challenger, there's this sense that you can do it. Like the person you're in a relationship with or yourself. You can pull this off. You got to trust the process. How do you feel in that space? You feel aware. You feel empowered. You feel confident. There's a sense of clarity and direction. How do we behave? You provoke or evoke themselves to take a sense of action. Like this is, you're leaning into stuff, you're stepping into things, you're moving into things with all the imperfections and the messiness of it. You find yourself saying, you know what, we're going to challenge it, but we're going to move into it. You hold yourself and the other people you're in relationship with in accountability, with a sense of accountability. This is where you might say, you know what, I'm tired of suffering in my marriage, in my relationship, in my partnership, or whatever it might be. We're going to go to therapy. And you lean into some kind of solution-based reality. You push into it. And you bring somebody else into the conversation. They hold you accountable. And so you move into the space of a challenger. And this third space, instead of a rescuer, you move into a space of a coach. This is where you empower people to inquire, to gain great clarity. Right? Your coach, if you ever had one, like they want you to win, right? They want you to succeed, and they're gonna sort of bring you along in that experience, and they're gonna be resourceful and creative. They want you to trust them as their coach, because after all, you need to trust them, because again, the goal is to win the championship, right? To have success, and the goal here is for the relationship to be really good. That resentment is kept at bay, and the expectations are really clear. That pain is, of course, going to happen, but suffering is, again, lessened. Now, this is where you feel compassionate and engaged, fulfilled and reflective, supportive and non-attached. This non-attached piece is really important, right? Because so many of us, we are dependent. We're codependent on each other and how we see each other. But in this space, you can't control the other person. You know that. Because in your dysfunctional space, you tried to control them. All you can do is coach. All you can do is advise. All you can do is speak into it. You can't ultimately control the outcome. And so how do we behave? There's empowerment and development. We encourage and provide positive reinforcement, sense of clear vision. So I remember not too many years ago, maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago now, my Taryn's grandmother had passed, Grammy Days. And we took on a trailer full of Grammy Days things, and my minimalism stuff was pinging and struggling to take on more things, but we brought in more things into our home. And we're unboxing these boxes and shoe boxes, and in there are pictures of Grammy Days' home 50, 60 years ago. mid-century. My wife loves furniture that's mid-century. We've got all this old stuff that she finds like for pennies on the dollar, this mid-century furniture, and she paints it, and it's got this kind of cool mid-century look to it. And I say, oh my goodness, that's Daisy's home. I look at the pictures on the wall. Oh, they weren't vintage then, but they're vintage now, but they're on our wall. Like, oh my goodness, my wife is living out in real time her childhood that had meaning to her. We have some of these 60s and 70s things hanging on the wall. I'm not even sure what they are. They're a bunch of yarn and cloth and sticks, and I don't even know how to call them. I just hang them on the wall. But I saw those in pictures of her family, of her parents' home growing up. And I'm reminded, oh, wait, what's going on here is more than my wife just not wanting me to be a minimalist, right? It's not about me. It's not about, I'm this victim. That people walk in and there's a sense that there's calm here, there's rest here, this is a place to be. That the walls are telling a story, that the walls have meaning, that something of consequence is happening in this home in a real way with all our imperfections. And as a coach, what is it you get to do? You have a sense of great clarity, right? You have new outcomes. Sometimes you have to reset. You have to go back and say, guys, we got to create some new plays. We got to change everything up, and you create new plays, and hopefully leads to better results. And so, I find out that my wife has a certain vision for what the walls need to look like. Kids come over, heavy metal kids are like, this is something meaningful. It's bringing something to them in terms of where they sit in their own reality. And so for you today, who are the people that you have these false expectations towards, that you're trying to manipulate them in such a way so that they can somehow give you some sense of reality that you long for, but they don't live up to it, and so now you have resentment. And you find yourself in this loop, this drama loop of being a victim and rescuer and persecutor. And for most of us, that's where we live our entire lives. And we're suffering. But what does it mean to have this place of being a creator and a challenger and a coach that leans into relationships, that allows the loop of our reality not to suck us in so much, that allows us to be able to move from reacting to choosing, from putting down to building up, from telling to asking. So in case you care, I've put this, Samantha helped me put this on our Watershed app under message resources. And so if you want to download these PDFs, again, feel free. They're not original to me. The credit is put on each of the PDFs. But highly recommend you download these, print them off, put them on your refrigerator, and let it be a part of your family narrative. Because the hope here at Watershed is that we get to give you filters and grids with which you begin to ask different questions. That we begin to give you resources that are deeply spiritual, that are deeply practical, that are meaningful, that help you lean into seeing your life through a new lens and a different reality. And so this morning, I find myself often living in this place of victim, rescuer, and persecutor, and literally having to consciously, I had this conversation with Matt this past week. I had this conversation with my wife this past week. I'm finding myself falling into a victim mode right now. Or I'm persecuting right now. I'm trying to rescue. I literally am using that language and saying, well, what does it mean for me to fall more into the space of a creator, challenger, and coach? And same with you guys. What does it mean to be in a space where we are empowered and we're not living in a space of drama? Let's pray. So, God, I'm grateful for this community. I'm grateful for a community like this who I think is honest with how they see reality, how they see the relationships. They show up here any given Sunday morning hoping to maybe walk away with tools and resources that maybe helps us along in our relationships. And so I pray that this morning is one of those encounters. I pray that I continue to find myself growing in this way, because this is an area that I need so much personal growth in my own way. I'm grateful for the people that sit in these seats, for how they challenge me, how they push me, how they coach, how they help create new realities for me. I thank you for the patience and the questioning that sits in this room. I thank you for the ability of of these men and these women and these people here who sit with this sense of inquiring and wanting to know, understanding each other better. I'm grateful for the people that have had conflict with, and yet we find ourselves maybe moving to a really good place where the expectations are clear and resentment is less. And so, Father, may we be a community that sits well into the pain. We lean well into the pain because we know that pain is going to do something to us. And it's the suffering that we learn to manage better. So, God, we love you. We're grateful for you, grateful for this community. In Christ's name, amen.